Will you pray with me? Come, Spirit, come. Fall fresh upon us as we encounter ancient writings and stories and hear their call in our contemporary times. And may the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. So friends, it is good you are here today. Easter Sunday is truly one of the most joyous celebrations in the life of the church. Whether you are joining us here in the sanctuary or online, I am so glad you are here. So, dear ones, today we celebrate resurrection. And my guess is if we are here today, probably most of us have considered the concept of resurrection just a bit. Maybe a little, maybe a lot. Trying to understand what the resurrection was and what it means, that has been a topic of discussion and debate and conflict and contemplation for centuries. All the way back to the earliest stories of Jesus. Now we know something happened. Something happened after Jesus died. We know that somehow, against all the odds, Jesus' story continued in a radical new way, a way that gave his followers the courage to go out and to continue to tell and to live into that story. Jesus' followers found the courage to go and tell Jesus' story of unconditional love, radical welcome, expansive fellowship, gracious and lavish healings, and that beautiful call back to community and relationship with each other and with God. That's the story that Jesus taught, and that's the story that he lived. And that's the story of Jesus that continued then, and the story of Jesus that continues to this day. It is a love story that doesn't end. It is a love story that lives on. It is the story of the resurrection. Now, I spent a lot of time thinking about how to describe a resurrection for this particular sermon, because y'all are a very diverse group. Some of you may not have been in church for years. Some of you may have been wounded by messages taught by or actions taken by churches. And to you, I say, I am so sorry that happened to you. Some of you may have been brought by a loved one, and some of you may come every Sunday. And some of you may be here for the egg hunt or the mimosas. All are welcome. So this morning, we all bring different questions and backgrounds and needs and thoughts about the big question at the heart of today's celebration: what is resurrection? Now, next Sunday, with the aid of a ball of yarn, I'm going to take on the question of, did the earliest Christians make up the resurrection? And if you have the slightest bit of Bible nerd in you, like I do, you will find that one very interesting. But today, however, we're going to take on the question, what is resurrection? Now, some of us may understand resurrection as the physical raising of Jesus, or the metaphorical or symbolic raising of Jesus. Some of us may understand resurrection as the general restoration of life, or the act of reviving something or someone, kind of like that glorious bloom of flowers that comes after the rain falls in a desert. And some of us may understand resurrection as the act of bringing a new life out of old, of beginnings emerging out of endings, sort of like those precious nursery trees in our Pacific Northwest forests. and how those trees in their death provide new life and hope to the forests. And some of us just may have more questions than answers. All of those understandings and ways of entering into this story of the resurrection are welcome here. So this year, for our Lenten journey, we've been working with the theme of moving out of our own wilderness and coming home to God. We've talked about ways to draw near to God through the actions and prayer practices that we can take to be on the way, engaged in the work of bringing about God's kingdom here and now, and in doing so, connecting with the very heart of God. And we've talked about that ultimate homecoming that happens when we die, when we are met and we are welcomed home by God. And we've talked about coming to the realization that we don't have to journey home to God. We have always been home to God. It's not God that's distant. It's often our own stuff that gets in the way of seeing God's vast and unknowably huge love within us and surrounding us. Now, sometimes the stuff that gets in the way is old messages about God that we may have been exposed to in years past. Messages about a judging, an angry, or a punitive God. And sometimes what gets in the way of seeing God's ever-present love is fear or doubt. Sometimes what gets in the way of realizing God is closer than our very breath is grief or pain. And sometimes shame gets in the way of feeling that tender embrace of God in our lives. Feelings that we are not good enough. Feelings that maybe we don't deserve that kind of love. Now, for me, it is all of the above. But here's the very cool thing. God's love, God's unconditional love, exists not in spite of who we are, but is love that flourishes fully, seeing our complete messy selves. That is the truth that Jesus lived and taught. He taught love that was expansive, welcoming, gracious, and lavish. That was and is the truth of Jesus. And central to Christianity's understanding of Jesus is that the expansive and unconditional love that Jesus demonstrated and taught and lived revealed God's love for all of creation, including each of us. God's love comes to us in the message and the life of Jesus. It shows us the very heart of God. And that big, bold love did not die with Jesus. It is that message of big, bold love that rose on Easter morning. It is that message of unconditional and lavish love that was resurrected on Easter morning. And it is that message that we celebrate today. We are unconditionally loved. We are seen. We are known. We are enough. We always have been and always will be home with our God. Resurrection is both that simple and that big. It doesn't necessarily have to be a complex theological concept that defies reasoning or belief. It can be a simple truth that goes like this: we are loved. And out of that love, we are called to reflect love into the world. We are called to work for peace and justice in our world, to feed the hungry, to welcome the refugee, to see the beloved in every being that we encounter. Because when we are well loved, we must in turn love well. Friends, today we celebrate the ever-resurrecting truth of God's great love, big enough to heal, big enough to transform, and big enough to call us out of our fears and our shame. Today we celebrate the truth that God's love is bigger than any ending. God's love is never ending. Today we celebrate that God's radical, unconditional, and lavish love is rising in our lives and in our world, bringing healing and justice and peace. And today we celebrate that there is no wilderness, real or self-imposed, that can separate us from the love of God. We are home. Praise be to the God of homecomings and love. Amen.